When I first looked for toggle switches online, all I found was complicated code that was either too long or too complex to read. So I made this video to give you the simplest toggle switch that has the most basic CSS. So to start, all we need is a span within a span. But that will give us nothing because we need to add in the styles. So let's name the spans. Let's call the outer span I and the inner span ball. So just like our eyeball, the switch is going to toggle. Now let's add some styles to give our spans a border. So border red and border green. After 500% zoom, the spans are finally visible. So let's give them some dimensions. Let's first go big. The eye gets a width and height of 100 pixels and the ball gets a width and height of 50 pixels. Save, refresh. The spans don't seem to take the dimensions. This is because spans are by default display inline. So the size of the span is controlled by the size of the contents inside. So if I give some text inside, the span size automatically increases. So in order to stop this behavior, we need to make our spans inline-block. Now our spans become independent of the contents inside. So let's go ahead and remove the contents and make our spans a little bit smaller. So 100 becomes 50 pixels and 50 10 pixels. But our eye needs to be a rectangle. So let's go ahead and make it 50 by 20 pixels. Now our ball is sticking towards the top corner, which can be easily corrected by adding a margin of 5 pixels. So our eye is 20 pixels, the ball 10, the top and bottom margins are 5 pixels, giving total 20, and the side margins nicely place our ball at the center. Now if we replace the borders by background colors, we get a nicer look. But to finish our look, we need to add border radius. Now our eye is a tablet capsule and our ball is a ball. But the question here is, how does the same code applied to the same spans produce two different results? To make better sense of it, we need to play around with border radius. Say you have a box and you add a radius to it. You can see the edges getting shaved, and if you increase the radius, the arcs are getting sharper and sharper. Now looking at the symmetry, one would assume there is an invisible circle that cuts off all the borders. But that's not true, because for a 100 by 100 pixel box, a border radius of 4 pixels gives us a circle that never leaves the box, but the box gets shaved nevertheless. This is because instead of using one big circle, the border radius uses 4 smaller circles. So for each corner you have a circle, and our box gently wraps around all of them. And the easier way to think about this is, the amount by which the border recedes back is 4 pixels, the same 4 pixel our circles are using for its radius, our border radius in this example. But what if the length of the box is 10 by 10 pixels and we ask the borders to recede 7 pixels? Well, in that case, CSS will ignore our commands and recede back only 5 pixels. So no matter what values we give, the rectangle will always be a capsule and the square will always be a circle. So now that we got our toggle, we need to now make it toggle, which is very easy. Just like we moved the sticking toggle to the center using margin, we can move our toggle to the right using the same margin. So 35 pixels of left margin, 5 pixels of right margin, and ball of 10 pixels gives us total 50 pixels, the length of the eye. But we want this style change happening when someone clicks our toggle. For that, let's remove the code and place it under a new class called rollRight. And when someone clicks our toggle, we'll call this function called rollRight that will add the class to our span and remove it if it's already present. So in pure JS, we will select the element with class name and then check if the class name includes rollRight. If yes, remove it, and if no, add it. Our toggle switch is done with just one problem. Our toggle here is too jerky. Instead, we'd like to make it more smooth. For that, we need to set the transition to 0.2 seconds with a little ease in to get that smooth flowing effect. And with that, our toggle switch is done. with just one problem. The problem with our JS code is it's very inefficient. Instead, if we just imported jQuery, a powerful JavaScript library, using its CDN, which is just one line of code, then adding jQuery lets us remove all these lines of code and replace it with a single command that selects all elements of ball class, where dot means class, and toggles them with rollWrite class using this toggle class command. And done. Just 2 lines of code. But the problem with this is, if I have multiple toggles, then all of them will toggle if I just click one. Why? Because we use classes. Instead, if we give our balls IDs like 1, 2, 3 and so on, and pass the ID to rollWrite and use the ID with a hash prefix to tell jQuery that this is an ID, then we can fix the system. Now before we look at how to add labels, because aligning them is quite tricky, let's say you want a toggle that has a more leaner look. Then the technique for it is pretty much the same, with a few adjustments. That is very interesting. So let's call the leaner set of spans track and slider, where the ball is now sliding on a track. Then for the styles, we just copy paste the code and then decrease the height of the track to make it slim. Our ball has disappeared. Now I could change the ball's color, but that would make it look ugly. Instead, we'll add a box shadow of 0, 0, 1 black. Now before I explain the Morse code of box shadow, let's try to position our ball using position relative. So relative to our current position, we are going to give directions for the toggle on how to move. So if we say bottom 5 pixels and right 5 pixels, then our toggle will move top 5 pixels and left 5 pixels. So in position relative, bottom is top, top is bottom, and everything is reversed. And if you can't get it right the first time, just simply trial and error the values till you get it right. Similarly, the key to understanding box shadow is also trial and error. Say I switch off this value and switch on the others by giving a value of 15 pixels each. The result we get is so basically the black ball we got is the white ball's shadow, and the third parameter simply blurs it. So the first 2 parameters moves the shadow in the x-axis and y-axis. So giving the parameter 0, 0 hides the shadow behind our ball. But if you get really creative and have a lot of time in your hands, then you can create your own solar eclipse. And not just animations, box shadow also lets you give multiple shadows. So like cricket players getting multiple shadows, you can give multiple shadows in your code using commas. And if you get really creative with a lot of time in your hands, then you can really make it rain. Now the ability to add multiple shadows is actually pretty serious idea in CSS. For example, when we look at the sun, we never realize that we are actually seeing 4 colors: red, orange, yellow and white. When we were kids, we used to draw the sun yellow, and if we do the same thing here, this is how it looks. So to get our majestic sun, we need to use 3 shadows, yellow, orange, red, where the yellow shadow falls on the inside, mixing with our white to give this beautiful sun. So back to our toggle switch. Now if we try to use the same style rollWrite, it doesn't work. So we trial and error and find a new margin left value and add it in a style called slideRight, and likewise tell our JavaScript function what style to use for which toggle. So the function becomes generic enough to accept both ID and style, so that the same function can be used to toggle both. And finally, if we add labels using same span, our labels don't get aligned properly. Now for the fat toggle, just changing the font size does the trick. But for the leaner toggle, we need to use position relative to lift the labels up to our toggle's height. And lastly, if you want matching colors that gel well with each other, you need to use an online color palette generator or understand color theory yourself to create your own harmonies. But if you are like me, who finds the words saturation, brightness, luminescence, value, tint, shade tone and hue all very confusing, then subscribe to my channel because I'm making a video on that. I'll see you next time.